The first question I wanted to ask you guys, so when we talk about high strangeness, especially in regards to cryptid activity, can anyone talk about specifically what we're talking about? What falls under that category of high strangeness, especially when we're talking about cryptid activity? There's certain things that we can look for so that way maybe people in the audience who aren't familiar with the subject matter that we're talking about. No. Eric, somebody over there?
That which goes bumps in the night, you know?
Yeah.
Well, when you talk about high strangeness, a lot of people are going to see orbs in the woods, or you'll hear noises, which rocks from very typical to what you have, and if you put it in a house, would be a poltergeist. But out in the woods, you go with big. So there's a fine line of something that's physical and then something that's paranormal that can actually affect. I mean, the whistles could be a physical creature, or it could be a mimic, as some of us know from a paranormal standpoint. So from my experience, we've seen all three: UFO, cryptid, and paranormal. I don't know why they gather in one area, but that's what something brings them there, whether it's one or all of them. That's exactly what we've been seeing.
Yeah. I know specifically another thing about the lights, and that's a great point. A lot of researchers, especially in the cryptid world, have talked about the lights. Even people who fall under the flesh and blood category, thinking that something like Sasquatch is purely physical flesh and blood, unidentified animal. And then there's also things like mind speed that is talked a lot about. People who kind of research the high strangeness cryptid activity. People talking about being zapped, quote unquote, all these things, time loss. Is that something, whether on the cryptid side of things or like the drone researchers, is that something that you come across, that you kind of verify or say, hey, I've experienced that, or in my research, my investigations, I've encountered something similar to that?
Been doing this stuff for about 20 years, and I've had experiences with all different kinds of stuff. Time lapses you're talking about, lost time, gained time, potentially almost walking into history, like a time tunnel type thing or a portal. I've seen into history, and I think it's a cool place to investigate. I need to do that as soon as I get done going to the bathroom. I came back and there's nothing there. It's like, what was I looking at? And if I would have stepped through, it's like, what might have happened? I don't know. I might not be talking to you guys here today. Or still trying to find a way back from something in the history. But when you're talking about also, you asked me about high strangeness. The way I look at that, I think that answer would be, it's becoming mainstream. We're always talking about Facebook. We're always talking about other, specific cryptids, which I don't think Bigfoot is in the cryptid realm. I think it's a separate category. Ghosts and different things, but we talk about the mainstream stuff, but I look at it, and what are the other things that we have no clue about? The other weird things we may have encountered, either as just walking out the woods, just driving along the highway, driving here, there, whatever. There's a lot of really, really weird things out there. They just pop up occasionally, the most, sometimes been opportune times. That's kind of what I think of when you're talking about high strangeness. I'm not talking about your normal stuff. High strangeness would be, and you may get to this a little bit, but one of the examples I've got is I'm coming back from an investigation about 2 o'clock in the morning, and what I see ahead on this 2-lane highway, non-divided, nobody out. There's been nobody out for 30 minutes. Heading towards home. I got another 2.5 hours to go. Fully wide awake, and this thing I see up ahead crawls out of the reeds up near the Illinois River, and I'm like, what the heck is that? And it creeped out onto the highway. My side I could see it ahead. My headlights would just start to pick it up. But then it rears up like a giant inchworm and looks right at me. And I'm like, oh my God, am I going to hit this thing? Am I going into, some kind of a science fiction movie? Am I part of this? Run over this thing. I'm not even going to stop to take a picture on the other side of the highway and kept on going. Those are the weird, I think those are high strange stuff. Everything else is like, oh, okay, it's a big thing. Yeah, a lot of us have seen one. A lot of us haven't, but.
Talking about high strangeness, I think I'm sitting next to one.
I work.
I think when you're talking about the high strangeness and Bigfoot, I think you're talking about two totally different subjects, apples and oranges. I think Bigfoot is a flesh and blood creature, if there is such a thing as a Bigfoot. I do know that I saw a cryptid. I wouldn't call it a Bigfoot. I've never seen a Bigfoot, but I don't put myself out there in the woods to look for one. I'm tasty. I let everybody know that. And Bigfoot would eat me if he had a chance. So I'm not a big fan of being out there and placing myself in situations where I can be ate. But my wife and I, one of the reasons why we started the group is because we saw whatever you classify it as, it's fit in cryptid realm. But I do believe what we saw was flesh and blood, not a psychic manifestation or anything like that. I agree about the orbs and stuff like that, and you can see those anywhere. Like anomaly, what are they? Are they spiritual? Are they electric? We don't know. But I mean, what we saw was a creature on all fours crossing the street. We saw it in a well-lit, in the middle of the town area. We saw it for at least 8 seconds, well-lit. It was a low-to-the-ground creature, long. Originally, immediately we thought it was a black panther running through the middle of McAllister, Oklahoma. But like I said, 8 seconds, you can take in a lot, especially when it's something amazing. You realize it didn't have a tail. It wasn't a cat face. It looked more like a bat type face. The front legs were high arched over its back, almost like wings folded into itself. And the way it was moving was not like a cat. And really, I just thought, demon, that's a demon. And she's like, holy crap, did you see that? I'm like, yeah. And she's like, what did you see? I said, no. No. Because I thought about my mom. And I said, what did you see? Because she obviously saw something too. And I asked her,
saw the same thing he saw. It looked like what I thought was a cat until I looked at it, and then I'm like, it's a bat. And then I'm like, it fell off the, I said, it fell off the building in the street with the guardrail. It's what it looked like. It fell off the building in the street. It looked like a guardrail, a guardrail with ran across the street. So, yeah, that's what I thought. We just saw something like that. Yeah. And so we went home. It was just time to go home, get off the street. It was late enough that nobody else was out in the street because we were coming home. And since then, we have heard about, 2 other times that we have seen. One was up in a tree. Somebody had heard their dog barking, and they went out and flashed a flashlight up in the tree, and it flew off. And they described it just like we had seen it. And once it was out in somebody's yard late at night. And then here recently, I don't know if y'all heard, a lady had gotten attacked, and this was like a couple of months ago, in McAllister, been in the news, and had gotten bitten and taken to the hospital. And she said it was not a dog. It did not look like a dog. It was something else. And it was all over the newspaper. And I haven't looked it up since then to see what had come of that. But they were looking for an animal that nobody else could describe. She didn't know what it was, but it definitely wasn't anything she'd ever seen.
Thank you guys for sharing the home card.
I was gonna say, I think we have the perfect example of high strangeness in an area, just west of Phoenix. With all of these different activities that occur there, on any given day, someone might report a creature, and one sees it completely different than another. One might report it as more looking like a Bigfoot, another might report it as looking more like a dog man or another cryptid. It has a rich history. It's part of our local legend and lore and has been since my dad was in high school back in the early 1960s. We also have, like, there's time slips that occur out there. I know my son had one. And what's fun is when we have the opportunity to come together and talk like this, just like what Bordertown has offered here in the town, you get to see and talk about and compare stories, and those can be so validating. So, like, my son's experience closely mirrors someone else's experience in this room right now. And he thought he was crazy. But just getting that validation from one another. It's also steeped in paranormal activity out there. You can go out day or night and have experiences. So I think, like, when I think of high strangeness, that's the spot that immediately comes to mind.
I think that, when you talk about that, multiple people witness the same thing have a different story. Perception, lighting, all that stuff matters. And I think that the difference is that a lot of the scripted things, if you're looking at them and you listen to the story, and they could all be seeing the same creature, but they're describing it differently. So it could be like the creature that we saw, it wasn't like fleeting, it wasn't fleeting. 8 seconds is a long time when you're witnessing something that's been vindicated. But it was in one of the largest lights cross streets in McAllister. There was a train station right next to it. It was well lit. It was not like we had to squint. I had enough time to stop my van and had to finish its walk off the street. So we witnessed. But after that, because up to that point, I didn't believe in any of this stuff. I thought you all were nuts. And some people talk about that. I was seeing my first ghost when I was 3 years old. That's all mine when I was 32. So up to that point, I was laughing at people who did this stuff. But we saw it. And so I started paying attention to all these stories. It could very well be the Mothman could have been this thing. The Jersey Devil could be this thing. All these things could be this thing. If you look at the story, there was always reading, there's always got within the trees, was that night, was not well lit area. So I'm like, okay, what are we? Because I really don't know the speed on this thing. So it could have big feet. I don't know. But anyway,
So you want to talk about a high strange place with the Jefferson Park and Jefferson, Oklahoma. And we've been there, probably 5-6 times maybe, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I know that Jeff and Brian had there 8 minutes, I think. And even Brian was out there in the woods, and the thing I know Brian, he doesn't get lost in the woods. He knows his way. He got turned around. And then there was also that time when we found that red ball, the dog ball out in the middle of the park that looked like it just came off the shelf.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, that was the weird.
Yeah, when you're out there with your cell phone, the thing with Brian at Jefferson Park, during that time, you realize his wife had that tracking thing with you track your phone, and his location during that missing time set him a mile and a half down the road.
Something like that.
So the whole time he was missing, and then it just went back to normal. And that's something fast, using the technology and the triangulation of your location. With the phone location, ooh, that's weird.
So why is there any kind of like time lapse or anything when it comes to certain cryptids? people say, well, they lost time when they saw the Bigfoot, or they lost time when they saw the skinwalker. Why do you think there is a certain time lapse or
So
missing time?
I have a theory on that. My theory is that's not actually cryptid. It's either a UFO or it's paranormal. We have a tendency to try to throw everything in one box out in the woods. And rather, Native Americans believe in physical creatures and spirits. So when we see something, like I've had eye shine in the middle of the night, got it on camera. When I go to enhance it, the eye shines there is no outline of the creature. So I don't know if the eye reflection is causing if it seemed like it's closer than what it actually was, or it was just two orbs floating there that I got my camera. The other problem with cryptids is our brains try to make everything seem normal. Like, we don't want to be crazy. But you can be crazy and still see a Bigfoot, vice versa. I got to see a Bigfoot in Arkansas in the middle of bright daylight and just assumed it was a guy standing in the water. Until the next day when I drove back right through the same area with another podcaster, Matt Horton from Drunken Cryptids. We literally looked down and see this guy in the water. We're like, oh, that's a guy fishing. I immediately said, oh, he's fly fishing in the Buffalo River. We drive through, turn around the next day, we drive, and we see boats down in the water where the guy was standing. The guys are on the boat for about a day. And whoever was standing in the water was almost twice as big. Then my brain realized, well, why would somebody be standing in the water wearing all black, no hat, no waders? Well, wait, he didn't even have a bag on. We're like, it happened so quick, and my brain was, oh, I'm not supposed to see Bigfoot on my third time cryptid hunting, and we didn't take pictures. He had multiple events, and he didn't even think he did the same thing. But our brains look at something really weird and go, oh, that's got to be. I think most people probably have seen a ghost. No idea it was an actual ghost because our brain goes, oh, that was just somebody walking through. That wasn't a shadow. I agree.
Always have high def, good quality dash cam. I always have one. I always have one, and that's probably why I never see it.
I appreciate all you guys' input right there. When you guys talked about how a lot of these things correlate, especially certain locations or hotspots, where you've got more than one thing going on, ones I know, and Scotty brought up Justice Park, and I feel like that's kind of an example of that, where you have all this weird phenomena. It's not just Sasquatch sightings, but it's Sasquatch sightings, other cryptid sightings, lights, all those things. So I do want to explore that a little bit more as we go on in the panel. But I wanted to ask you guys before we get into that. So we talked about witnesses, experiencing things, seeing things, how someone might see something differently than the other person based on perception or environmental factors. So how important is it as an investigator, as a researcher, if you're talking to a witness who has not just a cryptid sighting, but has a cryptid sighting plus on top of it, some of the high strange phenomena, whether it be missing time or a mind speak experience or whatever else, some weird paranormal aspect to it. How would you, as an investigator, whether cryptid, specialty or more paranormal based, how would you handle that investigator talking to those type of witnesses? And what kind of questions would you ask them to figure out, what they actually saw? Was it misidentification? Was it issue perception? What would you ask? How would you handle that as a researcher?
Yeah, I'm going to start real quick, just a real fast one. I'll say, one of our very first investigations, we came out, it was supposed to be a ghost thing. Then when we got out there, it turned into a ghosting, a Bigfoot thing, and a UFO thing. And I'll tell you where my investigative brain went to. Okay, this is all bunk. So my skeptic nature, the more fantastic it becomes, and I get it, people want to make it fantastic because the stories are great, but my skeptic nature now thinks, okay, well, none of this is because it's too much. Because living life and just experiencing things, and I've had a lot of experiences, and a lot of experiences where people had experiences. What I would do is different. I think it's just their mind is throwing so much at it. So when they start throwing a whole bunch of like experiences with the Bigfoot stuff, I start to believe what they're saying, and I don't believe that their testimony is accurate. Just like when I'm a medical professional and they try to tell me their story, and I'm like, going, that's not at all how that. But anyway.
Some of the questions I would ask, and when you're talking to the eyewitness, you gotta pay attention to what they are saying and know what questions to ask. I always find it interesting, the colors. What kind of clothes were you wearing? What colors were they? They happened by your house. What color was your house? What color was the sky? Was it dark? Was it daytime? I don't know why, but listening to so many anecdotal tales or stories of eyewitness accounts, color seems to be a big deal. Primary colors, the red, the yellow and blue, the primary colors, those come up over and over and over. Another thing is location. If you look at topographical maps, you can almost map out possible tracks of Bigfoot. They take the high roads. They when they cross the streets, why are they crossing the road? Point. Also, what activities was the eyewitness doing at that time? Yeah. By doing this over and over and over, you can almost ascertain patterns. You can get patterns and come up. What I like to do, what we do with regular Cryptids, is we try to come up with plans to attract them into the camp at night. I'm not interested in encountering one people by myself. Not at all. But when I'm snuggled in my vehicle, locked, and they come in and dig through the cooler, that's fine. We're going to try to have cameras. This year we're going to know, I told the team that, but I bought a bunch of blue lights already. We're going to track them with lights, night lights, the color blue. One year we used SpongeBob SquarePants. I played SpongeBob all night, yellow. And we do noise. One time we, there I was. I yelled. Nothing fancy. Yelled at the top of my lungs for 20 seconds. I fell down. I did, at that point, I was unaware of my actions. I woke up 10 seconds later with Coleman hovering over my face. And they were concerned because I just fell. So the high strangeness part, I made something unusual out of the forest, made a noise, and that seemed to work that night because we had activity. They moved things around, and I was trapped the next day. And another high strangeness. After I woke up, I'm just an idiot yelling in the woods. I figured I just passed out through the lack of oxygen, right? But when I woke up 10 seconds later, I felt like I just woke up after like 8 hours of sleep. I felt great. I was energetic. Why did they look? Was I zapped? Were they telling me, shut up? Yeah, we know you're there. Shut up. And they said, I fell. I don't know. This is one of the encounters we had.
That's just one of the greatest encounters we ever had, so definitely worth it.
Yeah, let me touch base on that little point. Good point. On Skinwalker Ranch, I was there during the offset program, FAST program, paid by the government. Phenomena. One of the key things we would do when we encounter somebody who had an encounter or a situation, they would call us, we would go to the location, do a GPS location specifically of that location, the timestamp of where they saw anomalies, where they saw the anomalies at. And we, like he was saying earlier, we have a topographical map of the property, but an area, GPS is depends. And during the course of the years out there, we would go back to some of these areas, interview witnesses multiple times, and sometimes the stories would change, sometimes it would be the same. During my own personal investigation on Skinwalker Ranch, which was from 2010 to 2016, I discovered people's experiences were the correlation of deep history of ancient indigenous artifacts and locations. We talked about earlier about how the history plays a part in the phenomena, and it's true. And once you tune in your own personal frequency to that frequency, that history, it's almost like the same, you know, you observe nature and then eventually nature observes you back. It's the same type of thing. And we found in that area, people's correlations, there was also a heavy presence of history. So that history overlaps, and sometimes it was residual energies or experiences, and sometimes it was a one-off shoot. I have countless stories and countless things I could go into in detail, but for your question, we used to take GPS location, a timestamp, interview not just that specific witness, but we would go around and interview everyone within a 5 mile or 2 mile radius of that individual to see if they had overlapping stories to kind of piggyback of what they experienced.
Yeah, I'm really happy you're on the panel because obviously talking to you at the booth earlier, you're very much qualified to talk about these subjects. You know, Skinwalker Ranch is a prime example of, you know, what we were talking about earlier, multiple phenomena happening in one location. Could you kind of talk about maybe some of your experiences out there?
Yeah. Well, a prime example we talked about earlier, we had mentioned about time slips, and James Keenan, who's a good friend of mine, I worked with him for several years now. He's on the TV show Blind Frog Ranch. I spent several years up there as well with him investigating before the TV show stuff and before Dwayne passed away, unfortunately. These areas, specifically in the Uinta Basin and probably here in Kansas and central United States, there is a James Keenan theory, but also agrees on it. Some of these areas that have these magnetic anomalies come from a concentration of meteorite impact or debris fields, and that heavy iron creates a magnetic anomaly. And his theory is some of these specific locations, specifically at Skinwalker Ranch, where they call it triangle, we call it the band back in my day. He believes it's where time compresses, where the past, present, and future overlaps. And once you tune your own personal frequency into that vibration and go into these areas and you become aware, you're aware of something spiritual or something out of the ordinary, it can become aware of you and present itself. And that's kind of his theory. And that's kind of like what we experienced out there. There's some of these areas with high concentration magnetic anomalies, but also the artifacts and stuff. Once you kind of tune in your awareness, you project your energy, your frequency, your vibration, you can tap into that line and experience these things. Indigenous cultures have been specifically going to Skinwalker Ranch for 8,000 years. I have 8,000 years artifacts on that property that span 3 separate timelines of cultures going to a specific location. And they were either drawn there for good hunting grounds, or maybe it was the magnetic anomalies that were there embedded in that area that what they view as a spiritual place. And I think, personally, to view that property not through a scientific lens, but through a spiritual lens, is the only way I understand that. And a good way to understand that is by taking the boots off, grounding yourself to a physical location, and grounding your body to the earth, like our ancients did thousands of years ago, of how they were connected to earth. You have to kind of push the topic the same way. And once you do that, once you open up that mindset, everything is possible.
Thank you so much for sharing experiences on that subject. So before we get any further, and I probably should have asked this earlier, talk a lot about possibility of these, you know, cryptid activities connected to the paranormal in some way. Is there anyone on the panel, whether this is the theory you subscribe to, or maybe you want to play devil's advocate, is anyone on the panel maybe holds a different view, holds the idea that maybe these cryptids are in fact just flesh and blood, unidentified creatures, and there's no paranormal aspect to them? Does anyone share that viewpoint possibly?
From what I've experienced, I'm not really a researcher on cryptids nor UFOs. I've got a vague understanding, but I've got experiences in all of those. I see them as all related. As far as the cryptid side of things. I do believe they are flesh and blood, but they have another way of moving around that they're more interdimensional, so that they are physical, but they can move around interdimensionally, and that's why we can't really find a lot of these things. Very, very rare, and maybe on those occasions we do, maybe their interdimensional device isn't working. I don't know. But I do believe it's flesh and blood, but I don't think they're not walking around like a bear all the time. You can see it, and they can't. Bears can disappear in the brush, but it's not like a cryptid is something I think completely different.
Anyone else want to add on to that?
The only thing I'll say about the subject is once you think you got to figure it out, something comes along and throws you down somewhere else.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's a lot of people that believe like Bigfoot can go through the veil. And there's some that believe that Bigfoot, because every time you see a Bigfoot, you see a UFO. So there's different beliefs that people think that Bigfoot's an alien or Bigfoot is just transferring from one dimension to another dimension. So it's very interesting to hear all the different concepts of it because it is different opinions. And I've spoken with quite a few of you guys on here, and every one of you has a different kind of way of thinking of how Bigfoot is. But what about like Dogman and Mothman and other cryptids like that?
Same reasoning for me.
Demon. I was gonna say, I think we're trying to throw a whole bunch of things into the same box. I think there's flesh and blood creatures out there. I think there's some interdimensional creatures, whether that be aliens or whatnot. I think call them fae or call them natural spirits in the forest are going to present whatever they think is going to keep somebody away. I mean, shadow creatures happen to be 8 foot tall, humanoid looking. I mean, as we go out there, no one's an expert. You know, even in the paranormal world, we all have theories, and that's about it. It's the same in the woods. I mean, I know what a bear is, but after that, you know, what can Bigfoot do? I've had eye shine where I heard it come up on me, catch it on camera, and then within a couple of seconds, it leaves, and it's silent. Like, that could be natural, but that is very easy when you're like 10 to 15 foot away, and you heard it come up, and then it just closes its eyes, and it's gone. And there's no rustling of leaves, there's no explanation, because you figure, you heard the rustling of leaves coming up, it has to be rustling of leaves. But maybe it's just really good hide and seek. You know, but I think we mix things together sometimes. I've seen the tracks myself, I've seen something in the water, I've had rocks get thrown, rocks stacked, logs snap, you know, there's something physical there. That doesn't mean that they're no different than a house, maybe poltergeist, or a residual or intelligent all in one location. I think you get out there. So what's funny is you had mentioned a high iron content meteorite. One of the locations in Arkansas, that's one of the local legends, is that's a meteorite site, and there's a ton of Bigfoot activity. But rock throwing, trees get knocked over, no one sees it happen, so that poltergeist. Like I said, I think you need to take each location by itself and kind of try to separate it into boxes. Okay, that's probably paranormal, but no, we got friends, we got air samples. And then you guys mentioned, how do you guys have time under 30 minutes? Because most people aren't paying attention enough on their, unless you lose 30 minutes or more, most people don't notice it 5 minutes. That's just me scrolling on TikTok. So that's one of the hard things for us is we're talking to people. They experience time slip, and they're like, they never really thought about that. How long were you out in the woods or in the house? And then they're like, well, most people that experience this aren't investigators. You're interviewing people that have personal experience, and then they realize they didn't pay attention to
how long did it happen, how long did it happen? And that gets all boring, well, a few seconds, and you're like, well, that doesn't sound like a few seconds, it sounds like it's been a minute or two.
Maybe, yeah, you know, I think that some people, not just clients who we talk deal with, but even investigators, you think sometimes they're witness stuff, and in the bag you carry them. You believe that something's going to be out there, or that you could possibly witness, and then you witness something, brain gets quite snapped at that, then automatically goes to some kind of paranormal. That, like you say, the eye shine, them creatures that, you know, they're out there, they want to survive. You know, so they're out there and their job is to be alive real good, real fast, because otherwise they turn into life. So here we are, we move like, what? And they're gone. So it could be something simple like that.
Correct. Speaking from experience, I've been mistaken as a Bigfoot several times on Skinwalker Ranch. One of my time, there were people who came out there looking for cryptids or UFOs, and I'm in the bushes observing them, because that was my job. And then later on, I would see a post online about Bigfoot, and it was me. You know what I'm saying?
We've done that ghost hunting because we split up in teams, and we just had a large hospital one time. We took pictures like, oh my God, shadow people. It was like, oh, it's a great picture, but no, it's everything.
Oh, yeah,
That's why I wear this. So you'll never see that I'm a shadow.
Well, so we're kind of already talking about it, so let's fully get into it now. So these areas like, you know, Skinwalker Ranch, like other areas, we as retro cryptids do, where there's this overlapping phenomena of cryptid activity, UFO activity, you know, those are, you know, more paranormal activity, you know, you name it, the time loss, everything. What do you guys think is behind that? Do you think that there's just a convergence of all these different distinct phenomena at these locations, or do you think it's all the same thing? Or do you have a different theory? What are your guys' thoughts?
I like this. I think consciousness plays a big part of this when you project. Consciousness and your correlation to places plays a huge part of this. This was a big part of Bigelow's research just recently, but also during my time on Skinwalker, since 6 years out there, 90% of the time was alone, with just myself, my camera, and my dog, the dogs out there. And I will tell you, tapping into that environment, when I say tuning your frequency, tuning your own personal energy into a location that has thousands of years of history, your consciousness can manifest a reality, basically. And most of these locations that we talk about have either a geology aspect to them that's unique, or there's thousands of years of history, or there's something there we just haven't kind of figured out, place our finger on it. But one concept or one aspect that gets overlooked a lot is the consciousness aspect that's happening. And once you become kind of aware of the bigger picture and open to the possibilities of some of these experiences spiritually and physically, that energy can attract you. That's a big part of it.
Anyone else?
I think your background also grow up. What did you learn? What did you experience? What were you told? What did you watch on TV that will really influence you potentially in a, but what is your background? What are your belief systems? That's all going to play into the fact of what you witness and how your brain interprets whatever you might see, hear, feel, whatever the case might be, whatever sense. And I do like the idea that maybe we do need to start looking at all of this more from a spiritual perspective as opposed to a gadget or reading of some kind that we're only interpreting. So I do agree that spirituality really comes in, especially with the Native American history.
Correct. I think indigenous cultures, especially at Skinwalker, were naturally drawn to the phenomena. What we call a phenomena, what they call history, the culture, because of the magnetic anomalies, they viewed the ranch as a spiritual viewpoint. And they went there, they observed, and they spiritually evolved with the land. and they didn't have gadgets to document the phenomena. They just had verbatim mouth stories, which is embedded in all their cultures. And there's also ancient petroglyph art all over the Uinta Basin going back thousands of years of very interesting things happening. So something was going on that they documented as best they could on stone or, pictographs through paint. And I think specifically Skinwalker Ranch, the TV show has some interesting things, but viewing it through a scientific lens is one aspect. But I think the most important lens is the spiritual lens. How our ancestors, and we all come from indigenous background, all of us do, how our ancestors were truly connected to the earth and the universe and to everything. It sounds kind of, coming from me, I spent 28 years in the military, and stuff like that. It sounds kind of bizarre, but it's true. It's the connection of spirituality and peace and stuff.
You don't want to use the word spirituality because it brings negative feelings for you or any kind of strange feeling. Call it energy. It's all based on energy and vibration.
I'd like to bring up, we're kind of talking about two different things. Because when you're investigating, I absolutely think who you bring, what you bring, will affect the investigation, whether or not you're doing cryptid or paranormal. Like there's certain people like Atchley here, I'd like to have her there at Garnett. She has a tendency to bring things out in the house because she's been there so familiar. But if you're wanting to see a visual, most people have seen it just because they're driving or they're walking in the woods or the film footage. A lot of times they didn't realize they got it on the film. It's when they go back and watch it, they're like, oh, what was that tall thing? So keep that in mind. When you're investigating, yeah, you definitely need to be paying attention to who you're bringing, what you're bringing, and how you're going to investigate the area. Do you have the history of the location? You know, what Native Americans are there, what, are there anything there to be seeking, versus if you're out in the woods, film everything and don't be the last one in line. Is the thing. But I mean, that's, as we talk about this stuff, as you guys are out there and walking around, definitely film anything and everything. You're not really investigating, you're enjoying nature, and you may have a better chance of seeing something versus us being out in the woods for 3 nights, in high locations. It's just, I keep that in mind. Investigation is different than just being out in the woods and going.
That's a really good point too, because when I used to give tours onto locations, for example, and just do overnights and whatever. But the first thing I would tell our guests was, if you came in here expecting anything, you might as well go home, because you've just blown everything out of the water. If you expect anything, see, hear, feel, you've just blown away every other sense that you're capable of using, because now you're focused on one out of maybe a dozen different senses that we have. So, don't screw yourself and go in thinking, oh, I want to see something. Most likely you never will.
You want to see something.
Yeah. I'm sorry, but you don't focus on it. Don't expect it. I said my comment is, don't expect it. Now you're only focused on one sense.
That's why I win.
Sleeper
Sleeper here. Their activity there is, if you ignore it and just have conversations like we're having. I don't know if you guys as podcasters, we've noticed more paranormal events because we talk about it happen. I was in a new hotel and had dwarfs around me when I was doing an interview with somebody.
Most of our ADPs that we got on investigations weren't answers to the question. Most of our ADPs are interjected in the conversation.
Yes, okay, yeah. And I think most investigation sites like Sleeper and other places, if you have conversations, they're going to join in.
Oh, yeah, they talk about food. What about food? That's going.
Well, Bigfoot, when you're camping, a lot of times you want to act like you're normal, like you normally can't. They're going to smell food. I mean, get off of the bears, but you're not typically doing as much wrong. Groups and all that. We're just camping. We weren't even doing all
out there just acting normal. Chilling, talking. And another thing is, take good notes, and that's one of the things that do. Take good notes. I mean, it's not how small you think it might be. It may be important. Be relevant.
Yes, has inspired me to take a lot of notes. Take her notebook.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you guys giving me input on that, and you guys are talking about like EVPs and things like this. I know for me, when we did our Whispers in the Woods documentary, around Springs, there was research this possible paranormal cryptid connection. It's one of those areas where it's just like we're talking about overlapping activity, is where I found one of my clearest EVPs. And again, to verify or go with what you guys are saying, it was also kind of the same deal. We weren't asking questions or anything, we were just going, and I was going behind Coleman Grimes and the guys walking, and then back in editing, and I hear this voice come through, talking. It's one of the weirdest things. So I want to ask you guys, as paranormal researchers, this is your specialty, is paranormal investigation. Maybe it's more so from a residential perspective or in a building or whatever. But if you, let's say, hypothetical situation, you guys are called into an area where there is this overlapping activity, there's cryptid sightings, you've got paranormal occurrences going on. How would you, as a paranormal investigator, how would you investigate that? What tools would you use? What methods? What would you want to look for? I just really want to pick your guys' brains. This is, for me, it's something that's more cryptid stuff. I really want to see your guys' perspective on this. How would you handle that? Like I said, if you were hypothetically called to an area like that, like I said, you've got multiple different types of activity going on at a location.
Yeah. As far as our DPRI goes, we pretty much center solely on ghost and residential investigations. We have had places where they talk about cryptids and other kinds of stuff going on, and all we can really do is observe, and then we would actually tell the client to find somebody who's more capable of doing an external investigation, because our equipment is designed for indoors. Our very first investigation was outside, and we realized, that's not our gig. But yeah, when it comes down to Bigfoot and stuff like that, there's so much about it and so many details. We can apply common sense to it. We can video, we can listen, but I know that wild cats can make the weirdest sound, and I know it weirds me out as a city boy. And there are people say it sounds like a woman crying, and it's just a bobcat. So I would be totally lost. So what I would do is I would find somebody who actually specializes in that. Especially those people talk about UFO stuff. They call our team. I'm like, that's not our gig. So some teams want to take everything that's paranormal. I specialize in my professional life and specific career, and that's what I know. You can ask me other stuff in medical. I don't know that, but I know X-ray really good. You can ask me stuff in paranormal. I may know a little bit of stuff outside that, but I specialize in ghosts. So I kind of have to step on any of them.
I would probably ask my good friends that I have that are cryptid in. So be like, hey guys, you want to go on an investigation with me?
There you go. Networking. Yep.
Exactly, networking and being able to communicate with the paranormal people and share the experiences is something that I love doing. So if I was to ever have a situation where I was called in on something like that, I would definitely be asking Scotty or Lisa to come with me and be like, hey, I need your guys' professional opinion on this because I have.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else?
I think I see just like in a paranormal investigation versus an outdoor investigation, just like you were saying, Coleman, we can go prepared with all of the equipment that we might need to conduct that investigation, but in the end, it's going to be the spirit or the cryptid or whatever you're dealing with that ultimately decides what activity you're going to have. Like, we're not in control of that. So if I were to approach an investigation, we would probably be looking at hotspots, history of the land. My son's had experiences out on our property, one that changed his life. but also, similar to what you were saying, down there, he's so connected to the land, you know, and I think that has so much to do with it. So, yeah, I would say, you know, you take what you can out there to hopefully spark things or make things happen, but ultimately, we're not the deciding factor.
I would say take everything you have on equipment wise. First cryptid investigation, we went out, during cryptid, we brought minimal equipment. They were expecting to find a flesh and blood creature, they ended up getting a shadow style creature.
Yeah.
So we didn't have anything to measure EMF or radioactivity. So when you're doing this stuff, definitely network. If people ask, especially if you find people that know the area, but take all your equipment. And then the other thing, if you're a paranormal researcher, you get inside a house, you don't realize, when you're a frame of reference in a house, I know that door is like, my eyes should have been saying I had it first time out and looking through my IR camera with a little 2.5-inch lens, and I'm thinking this creature is about 25, 35 feet away from me. And I'm watching, and it does this movement, and it goes, and it headlamp. You look up, and we're like 10, 15 foot away. And that was a lot closer than what I was expecting. So, like, if you're used to being in a house, you're in the woods, you lose that perspective of how near something is when you're looking through a camera versus most of the investigators right now on cryptid, they don't use cameras. They're using their eyesight. They're walking around with either red or blue light thing on the area. So network, take every piece of equipment you can take, because you never know. You might get orbs. You might actually get a flesh and blood creature. You might see lights in the sky. You never know. You have the tool, have it, just in case you throw it out. We have a horrible time with our audio recorders. I'm still better to pick up how seem to be a different frequency. Phone can't pick it up as well. Our voice recorders that get EVPs all the time, they don't pick up the noises that, you know, compared to the house. Like, it's clear as day in your ear when you go back and listen to that amplified noise. Maybe it's because of the, like, Ron Moorhead had a tape wheel. And the Sierra sounds everybody knows. I've heard those right before, and they never sound like that. When I'm trying to play back on my phone, you need it to 8 a.m. today. Okay.
And they're intelligent too. I think that they're far more knowledgeable than we are, probably. One of the most fascinating stories I've heard is from a woman that I just spoke recently in Arkansas, and she had a home and it was back up to the Appalachian Mountains. So they noticed that logs began appearing in their backyard, trying to set up an inner perimeter. And what they came to realize when they would go out to the logs, if they were on the backside of the logs near the forest, the motion activated lights on their home did not come on. They stepped over the logs, the lights would come on. So it was almost like whatever was out there, and they would see it, was creating a perimeter, a safe perimeter, so that they would activate equipment, which would be motion activation, around the home. I think equipment you take out there, recording you do, it's almost like they know. Just like in a paranormal investigation, they know what you're using, and they might choose to interact, but if they don't want to, they won't.
Well, I got a couple more questions, and then I would like to hear in a little bit, try to get to see if anyone has any questions in the audience, but probably a couple more questions. So I know from my perspective, you know, I'll jump on all the things a little bit, if we look at questions. You know, I feel like as a cryptid researcher, we've been kind of coming at this with the whole, they're, you know, unidentified giganticus or the relic hominid and all this. We've been doing this for a long time, and I don't want to say it hasn't yielded any results. Obviously, there's a lot of researchers that share that, hold that perspective in the world, we owe them that respect. But however, I do feel like we get stagnant in the cryptid community, and I feel like part of that is because we refuse to explore these types of perspectives. You know, and all the time they get off, like, you know, oh, you're woo, quote, unquote, all this stuff. And I think a lot of people now, we don't really approach it. We open to all these possibilities, because that's what true research is all about. What are your guys' thoughts on this? Do you think that there's kind of this closed-mindedness in the cryptid world to topics like this, that it maybe kind of holds back a little bit in terms of moving the field forward?
Conferences like this, they give us the opportunity to share.
Absolutely.
I think there's a old guard in the cryptid world that they don't want to talk about the blue aspect, and that is holding some of that back. But places like this where we can talk about it. I've noticed like for paranormal encounters, there's 1,000 paranormal encounters for one cryptid. I don't think that's normal. I think people are afraid to mention it. They might say they saw a Bigfoot, but they're not going to mention they saw it walk through a portal. You know, they're kind of selective like about it because they do get shunned. In the old guard of cryptids, it was flesh and blood only. If you mention anything else, you're shunned in groups. You know, BFRO has altered some of the sightings to leave out the woo aspect. So I think that the more we do this, the more we are willing to listen to people. Because maybe it isn't a Bigfoot that they're seeing, maybe it's an alien, maybe it's a specter, but give them a platform to be able to have that conversation. And let the team go out. And that's, of course, just my opinion.
That's the problem with some investigators. I am wildly skeptical on most things. Yeah, but I mean, you tell me your story, I'm sitting there listening like, oh my God, really, and I don't believe most of what I hear, but when I'm investigating, I take that story into account because I know that I don't know everything. And if you're an investigator, you're walking yourself into, you're pigeonholing your, what you're going to think you're going to see in this, you could be in for a while. You're not investigating, you're just trying to back up your own thoughts. So you have to keep in mind, open mind. I don't necessarily believe most of the stories that people tell me because a lot of stuff I've witnessed is different from what they did. So their opinion entered into their fears entered into what they told me to happen. So, but, you know, I'm still going to investigate that under all possibilities because I know that I've seen a lot of things that prior to 32 years old I didn't believe. So.
Anyone else, you boys from the regular cricket crew, want to add anything to that? Take it on.
Oh, often the investigators, different groups, they'll like be real secretive of what they're doing and how they're doing it, in the location. If, I got to note that if everyone wants to write down the location, I'll keep it. Keeping the location secret, that's no big deal, but, you know, the whole process of tactics, procedures, I think should be shared. It should be, you know, whatever. I'm gonna get the awesome photo and the other. Yeah, I don't care about that. Like I said, you know, we do different things to attract them into the camp. I'll share that information. Some of it has warranted success. Encounters. Not a full-fledged, here it is, like a Indian pose. No, we don't have those kind of photos, but we have a lot of audio evidence, footprints in the camp. We're hearing chairs move with our own ears. Not me, because that night I was sound asleep. But, you know, I think that's the thing forward, is to share what we're doing, the equipment. You know, I'll tell. I don't remember the name of our recorders. But we use the same recorders, and various different cameras. And you know, I'd like to talk about what works for us, what works, not works, benefits of infrared to not infrared, low tech, still frame
time-lapse cameras. Study. I like dash cams. I'm in my vehicle. I can't in my vehicle. Dash cameras on all my windows. And that seems to work. But I mean, they're on. It's not attracting, capturing any evidence. But yeah, so there's that. Just share your tactics and the equipment used, and I think that'll be awesome.
100% because, you know, we talk about, if you hear a lot of things, you hear this a lot in the paranormal community, about, oh, you use scientific methods. If you're not using peer review, if you're not sharing that stuff, if you're not sharing your location, if you're not having enough people investigate your location, try to get the same kind of evidence, you are not using science. This is not a fishing hole. I can understand, you know, I don't want people to use my fishing hole because it's where I go to catch fish and survive. But if we're trying to actually make this better and get people to believe, get people to understand, the best evidence you can have is corroboration. Because like in the paranormal community, if I get an EVP and has this voice sounds this way, you listen to it, you're like, oh, sure, that's a member of the team. I know it's not. Now, if another team from another state comes in and they get that same voice, and none of my team was with them, that's corroborating. So, I mean, and that's the way it is. We've never, this is my building, you stay out. I never did understand.
So the we're gangs.
Yeah.
All right, well, last question, and then we'll give the audience a chance to ask any questions to you guys. And it's kind of fun, but that's a good way to conclude it. What's the final verdict? Do you guys want to go down the line and do it that way, or just whoever wants to answer? When it comes to the question, cryptids, you know, high strangeness, is there a connection with the pure coincidence? I think I gathered the answer already, but like I said, just as conclusion, what's the final verdict for you guys on that question?
I think it's pretty much all together. If you see something, you got something, and then because explain to us, so that's paranormal, and that's UFOs, and then you got a Bigfoot. So I think if you look at it all as together, because everybody has specialized their own stuff, they specialize in their own thing. You get them together and you talk about the same thing. It may just be a different word that's used in one village compared to the other. I think there's a joining.
I use the term that's been coined a lot. It's all connected in life. Everything is related. I mentioned before, I think a lot of it is based on vibrational energy levels. It's just how you perceive it, what's your background. What do you believe? What do you personally believe? If you believe in this stuff, great. If you don't, you don't. I'm not going to change your mind just because you may not ever believe it because you've never witnessed it. So, but I think it is all connected. We got to figure out what that key is. I think that's the bottom line. We got to figure out what is the key that is connecting everything together. How do we work?
I think it's all connected.
Yeah, I think it's all connected.
I agree, I think it's all connected. I have no idea how, why, whatever. Hopefully we'll find that key at some point.
Oh, I don't have it.
You clean the fish?
Yeah, I know.
I agree. They said, energy, frequency, vibration is a key point in consciousness connection. But also it's very important, even to the subject, to separate your seeking for truth or seeking for validation. If your validation comes from 7 years of alien UFO propaganda pop culture, you're looking at this kind of wrong way. You've got to have a spiritual kind of a connection to the subject and wanting to see and experience those real things that people are talking about. That's super important. Because a lot of times when it comes to this UFO topic, it seems like people always say, well, I'm just here looking for truth, I'm looking for answers, when really they're just looking for validation. So you have to separate the two. That's important.
really have to go back a few years to realize all the groups that we're talking about. UFO people, UFO people, different people, all hate each other. And all fight all the time. Did you hear what the UFO weirdo brought? And you guys, would you chase a magical monkey? And those kind of, yeah, certainly there's good natured ribbons. Conferences like this, where you start grouping all of these people together, start listening to each other. Start to realize there's more we have in common with each other than we have. Interdimensionality was thrown out there earlier. That's kind of a side going on right now. It's one thing. These things are coming from somewhere else. They have the ability to slide in and slide out. Maybe they put this one here. We don't know. You know, there's various things that can all apply. We're still trying to fix it all. Kind of mystery. But talking with each other, comparing and all that is the best way forward. There's going to be things that UFO guy might specialize that's one that we never even considered. Same thing from this side. There's no comparison for a group together, bringing all of their resources together. So, I think we're way closer. We're heading in the right direction.
I'll say that when I first started ghost hunting, I was looking around at all the other ghost hunters and said, wow, these guys are weird. And then we went to a conference and saw the Bigfoot hunters and said, okay, these were not so weird. Those guys are really weird. And then we saw, I was like, man, these Bigfoot, oh, I don't know if I can handle this. And then we saw UFO people. And I said, man, those Bigfoot hunters don't seem so weird. And I was like, really, the commonalities were all weird. So, it's different level.
On top of that, the United States government spent $20 million researching the subject, so they don't think it's that weird as well.
You're saying our government's not weird?
All right, well, thank you guys so much. Big standing ovation for our panelists. Thank you guys. All right, so we got 3 minutes left. If there are any questions from the audience, you guys like that, go ahead.
Okay, and so we all have that indigenous genetic pattern. But I think what's really interesting to me is that over our country, just discovered, I mean, kind of knew about, but just discovered a great village of ancestors to the Wichita, that you have these people living all over our country. About the high strangeness just west of King, and I'm wondering if that is connected to the early indigenous cultures that were on the King River. There had to be a culture here, and what did they experience in those days? How does that all come together? Never heard anyone say anything about a portal in the Coleman region. Is that possible? Has anyone ever experienced that? And then go back on the indigenous stuff. Well, it's really important, I think, if you've got to slow down and listen to the land, because the land not always talks to you in like spiritual ways, it just talks to you in common sense. If you just slow down and listen to what it's saying. And that's what the native cultures did in those times. They listened to their surroundings. Well, so I have experiences on reservations in the northern part of the country, Pine Ridge and places like that. And people tell you that strange things happen on the reservation all the time. And I think that's because they continue to be aware. And so it's easier for them contact with that sort of thing, and very fun. That's why you're having contact now. I'm sure that it goes back to the cultures that were here before us. Except for I'm wondering, like,
Well, there are ley lines that cross out of the paint. So I know that's been theorized. Two of the best researchers on that are, Jess and Pam. I think I've learned everything I know about it from them. So as far as West painting, I agree. And I agree that the indigenous people that were in the area probably do factor into the experiences that we have. I know on our property, the most outdoor experiences are the places that we find the most artifacts. Like we live right along the Cheyenne Creek. And, one of the actually cryptid experiences that my son had, we have a mound that is on our property. My dad won't touch it. And I'm proud of that. Never lifted it up or dug or anything. And the reason we know what it is because it stretches across the county road and into a field. And if you follow it into the field, cornfield, you will find hundreds of artifacts we have over the years. So it definitely is some type of, it was used for certain purposes. But actually the last experience they had, my youngest called crying and said, we saw this. And when they took it out and showed us, it was standing right on top of the mountain. They got the eye shine and headlights pulled around and it's a bipedal creature. It did like 2 or 3 weeks into the timber, and that was it. But it's those types of experiences, kind of like with the paranormal, like kids, you're kind of hesitant to believe them because they're kids, but yet also they're open-minded. And so when they see something, they're just seeing something for what it is. And for our brains trying to correct that, they're just seeing for what it is. And the fact that it impacted him so largely, like that he would cry about it. He was truly fearful. And 2 of them thought it was one. So yeah, I think that has a lot to do with it. And it gets into the spirituality. So my son and has also had experiences. When he had his scary experience, he was in a deer stand. He might take us out before daylight and out after dark. He was hunting, fishing, always on the land. And when he had his experience, and I asked him all questions, every question I could think of, what was and he said, and one of them I asked him, what did you feel? Like, what were you feeling at the time? Like it was native. And I said, how do you know that? Like you're not describing a person to me, you're describing a creature. And he said, I can't tell you how I know that, but I know it. So just in the movement of it and the way it looked at me. Yeah, so I have a big connection.
You also mentioned, you just mentioned the ley lines also, and do you think that something really magical about you? Well, I think one of the magical,
I think it's the perfect storm. Jess has talked a lot about this in her research, but yeah, I feel like we're on a prime strip of land through southeast Kansas.
Yeah, I think you guys off, but I'll try to go and include after that, we're at that 10:50 mark. But again, thank you guys so much and on the panel for attending. Thank you guys, audience, for.
Series I want to know their opinion on.
Is it just
Okay, so my question is, it goes along with the floral theory and interdimensional theory. My theory theories I have, and I've heard this before, is that the cryptids have found natural portals in the country. And I've used that to go all over the country. What do you believe in that? Do you believe that that's a possibility, or do you believe that's just something trying to come up with a theory that sounds cool?
I believe it's a possibility, and I'm the most skeptical one of the bunch of that. And the reason why is everything's a possibility until it's proven one way or another. So I don't, my belief in something or my disbelief in something has nothing to do with the reality of the situation. That's my, so, could be. I don't know.
Could be, they could camouflage. They occupy camouflage. Why could other people have that?
Why can't there be wormholes on Earth and not just in
One of the biggest
comments about Bigfoot? Bigfoot is possible for something that big to exist in a localized forest area. There would have to be some kind of migration, some kind of hibernation on it. So that would be the closest. But we have seen this kind of migration. Stumble across the cave.
What I meant by migration, they migrate into the portal.
Exactly. So we get where we're going there, that would explain it. It's incorrect. Hard to prove. Unless you were able to somehow tag one and notice it's appeared from one side of the country to the other. We got fine.
All right, thank you so much to Coleman, Atchley, and our panel. I want to remind everybody, if you don't happen to get your question in, all of these people are going to be here all day, and you are more than welcome to go up to any one of them. The great thing about our ParaCon is that they are available to you at all times. So tell them your story, ask them a question, whatever you want. Just snag them up. So before I take a 10-minute break, I have a little announcement to make. We have a little impromptu surprise for you. So unfortunately, Lisa Martin and Alex Martin were not able to attend. They had a little thing come up and couldn't make it. However, Christy Campbell, our house medium, has offered to fill in that time space with a free open room reading. So if you come in here in 10 minutes, she's going to do a free 15-minute just open room reading. So come and enjoy that. She's fantastic, and she's also available for readings out in the front area there, along with Rachel Patton, who is doing room reading, and Lindsay Miles, who's doing arrow. They will be there all day. So go check that out. Also, the concessions are open, and the food truck, I believe, is just opening up outside if you want to start grabbing lunch. We will do a lunch break after Christy's open room reading and be open for an hour for you to go and grab anything that you want to eat for lunch. And I'll see you back here in about 10 minutes for Christy Campbell.